Okay, the red light is on. We can start. Centerville City Council is now in session. We thank you for your patience. We're sorry to get started a few minutes late. We had a great work session before this with our Trails Committee, who's proposing making some improvements in our plans for active transportation, walking and biking, and also looking at planning for mountain bike trails on the hillside. So we appreciate your patience as we get started a little bit late. We'll note for the record that all members of the City Council are here and accounted for. If I'll ask you to stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance, after which it's my turn to provide a prayer or thought. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father in heaven, we gratefully come before Thee this evening, thankful for this opportunity of self-government. We're thankful tonight for the many volunteers that provide great service to our community by serving and making this community a great place to live, and by selfishly giving of their time for others. We are mindful of those who have been impacted by tragedy and pray for those who are mourning, whether it be in our community or in other parts of the country or the world. We're grateful for our first responders who are willing to put their time and lives on the line to make our community safe and serve our citizens. We pray this evening for a spirit of civility as we discuss issues of importance in our community. We may treat one another with respect and listen to various points of view and make good decisions for the long term for families in our community. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Each meeting we start with an open session. This is a chance for any member to come and express comments on any subject of municipal concern, even if it's not something on the agenda. If you are here for a public hearing on the Pages Lane area, we'll be holding a public hearing later on that. But if anyone would just like to make any comments on a matter of municipal concern to the council, the open session is now open, and we'd invite you to come to the microphone and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Good evening, Council. My name is Hunter Nichols, and I'm from Centerville. I've seen that our recycling program is growing in popularity, and I would like to see it happen every week, like the green waste program. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. I'd like that too, if we can afford it. It's that blue can fills up fast sometimes.
Just out of curiosity with that comment, what percentage of citizens use the blue can?
If you recall, we had an opt-out program, and I think we were...
We're above 80 because
85 was my recollection.
we required that they opt out if they didn't want to be included, and so we met an 80% threshold. I think it's climbed a little bit since then because anybody that moves in has to take the recycling. They have no choice. But in regards to the weekly idea, somebody can pay for a second can. They can have 2 blue cans, still picked up twice a...
That takes extra space.
Yeah.
It does, but I think you're...
Well, we also talked about the idea of having the green waste turn to a recycle can versus a second garbage can. And the only reason that hasn't been more...
Just in the winter months, you mean?
Yeah. The only reason that hasn't been more fully explored, I think, is just because it was a very busy time for staff.
Yes.
So that is on our to-do list.
I thought the recycling company said that would be problematic for them in terms of making the recyclables dirty, that they were not interested in pursuing that. At least that's what I thought I remember in that discussion.
That sounds familiar to me.
think there was a concern of.
Right.
Can
They
you
didn't want to
make-
commingle them.
Can you make sure you keep the stream clean?
Right.
But I think we considered, we get more of these requests, and worth considering.
Yep.
Anyone else who would like to speak in the open session? Scouts, this is your chance. Seeing none, I'll close the open session and let's turn to the items on our agenda. First of all, we have some of our great friends, the Tonys, here to talk to us about the 4th of July celebration, speaking of great things in our community. So let's hear their celebration report first, and appreciate their great service to us.
So we wanted to start with a question. We submitted our notes, and we can go through them a little bit in detail if you like, or we could answer questions. Just a couple comments. We think the celebration went really well, and we had a lot of fun. And
Now, if your question is, can you do it again? Yes, you did such a great job. We'd love to have you do it again.
you know, we have actually anguished over that a lot. And initially we thought we wouldn't, but we decided that we will.
Oh,
Really?
I think that's our only standing ovation ever.
Yeah, that-
You're going to get a second one at the end of the report,
including
I
our
think.
children who have never given us a standing.
Well, if you come back next
this
year
is-
with the same answer, we'll give you another standing ovation.
We'll change that proclamation to a bronze.
Yeah. So, shall we just give you just a few details then? And so the budget for the for the celebration was $27,000, and the city had allocated a little around $23,000, and then authorizes to spend out of the account another $4,000.
that was the July 4th carryover account from year to year. It's a separate bank account and had.
But we actually didn't end up using the carryover, and so our spending was $21,500.
Fabulous. You're not
So-
very good at government. Government's
so-
used to overspend. You guys are really good. We're going to send you to
Now,
Washington.
I will say afterwards, though, we did buy, or 3 more new grills were purchased, and I don't know if you plan on charging that carryover account for that, but.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll take those out of that.
So they used the $4,000 that we didn't use, so that was good. Yeah.
And you are good at government, you just moved the number to somewhere else.
Yeah, which they spent, which the city spent. So, but we were all we needed more equipment, and we'd been borrowing personal equipment for a few years, and so now we can stop that, so.
Yeah,
You want to make
that's
a
a
couple
great thing.
comments?
So we just felt like some of the highlights this year were, we did get lots of positive comments about the parade. And you know, of course, as we're discussing this, we'd love to get your feedback too as well. But the Pages did work hard to get more bands in the parade. And they asked the commercial, okay, I'm seeing, well, yeah,
Yes.
that's great, good. Yeah, so we felt good about that, and we hope that that can continue. They also encouraged the businesses to really build on the theme. And as we watched it, we felt like, you know, some had done very minimal, but others had tried to really step up. So we did get the feedback that seemed to be more of a hometown parade feeling. So, and of course, you all in the Mercedes-Benz just started us off. So,
You could have spread out a little bit.
well, I think it's,
They couldn't even read your bios. It was, you guys raced
That's the
through
fault of
there.
the Mercedes-Benz, and Idle, it's still a pretty fast car.
Yeah.
so we were also really pleased with what our art and quilt show people did. If you didn't get a chance to get over there, they have both said that they would be willing to do it again. So we're really happy about that. So we'd really encourage you, and we're going to look at ways that we can really get that more open. But but they contacted personally a list of amateur and professional artists in Centerville. And I left to go over there right after Centerville's Got Talent, and I was already just on cloud nine a little bit, thinking of all the great talent that we have in our city, and then to walk into a display with incredible photography, sculpture, watercolor, oil, and then over 50 quilts too. It was just mind-boggling. You know, we live in a tremendously talented community. So that's something that we felt was great. And Centerville's Got Talent, we bumped that to after the parade, but the audience just filled the pavilion, and we had just tremendous focused audience for that. So we felt really good about that.
Now, I thought that worked well to showcase a few people before the before the fireworks or before the main concert, and then do the Centerville's Got Talent, have a more focused.
That works really well.
The audience cared about it because they were there for that.
Right, right. And where it had been in the other one, we felt like the audience was distracted. They really couldn't focus on what was going on. But this was a focused, engaged audience in Centerville's Got Talent. So we feel good about how we structured everything, and we don't anticipate any big changes for next year.
Except now the
Oh,
recommendations.
except, yes.
And
yes.
so there actually are some big
changes.
changes. Okay?
Not as far as the format goes.
The biggest change are in the recommendations, and you have these printed, and it's gonna, I think it's, with what we suggest, it's going to require some work from particularly the city employees. But the parade committee is really untenable and unsustainable from a volunteer standpoint. And the reason is because there's so much institutional and regulation knowledge and coordination. And so what I'd like to do is I'd just like to read these and then suggest that you all take them up in a way that's best for you. So, and we've tried to get the pages to serve again, but they've said never and never again. And so we hope that with these changes, maybe the next parade chair may respond a little bit differently, and the pages were wonderful. But, so we have recommended that a city employee be involved in the ongoing maintenance of the parade in doing several things. First, hold harmless agreements for property owners for use of commercial/LDS church properties. Receive monies and invoices for parade entries so that all payments go directly to the city offices rather than to a private residence, which has been happening, which is terrible. Obtain rental contracts for equipment such as barricades, golf carts. Contact businesses and other entries who have participated in prior years, including bands, color guards, military units. Some of these need to be committed now. And by getting them committed earlier than that, that's what improves some of the participation last year. Over time, this should facilitate communication and consistency in registration, as the contact person would be consistent. Secure signage for the Grand Marshal, the mayor and council cars. Coordinate donation of cars with either York or Mercedes or someone else. Coordinate development of regulations, ordinances, safety concerns with the city manager and the police liaison so that a specific and uniform plan is in place. These type of things they're institutional in nature. If one person in the city just always handled these, the institutional knowledge would stay with that person, and maybe make the parade committee a committee that can survive, because it really is not, it's been too much. Then the last thing that we want to suggest is considering a study to implement changes, to do changes or implement a study to consider moving to the big park, to the community park, the celebration. But to do that, it would require some significant infrastructure changes. And so that would be things like a Bowery. That would be things like refrigeration. There's some heavier items that would need to be done at the community park to be able to move there. But the space, of course, is amazing at the community park, and it's extremely limited at the old Founders, which I guess is the Smith Park.
Dwayne, when you say refrigeration, are you referring to the fact that we have the school over here with the ability to store the food for breakfast and so on?
Yeah, we have and we even have some access to heating and stuff like that in the school. And so those things, the refrigeration, I think, is the main thing. But which, I mean, a few years ago when we did the breakfast, we had a citizen donate a self-made refrigeration unit, and we ran it with a very long extension cord. And so, I mean, there are some things that maybe could be temporary, but it would have to be thought through, but the space at the Smith Park, we all know we're stacked in there elbow to elbow, but it would require, we think, some real study and some thought, so, okay? All right.
The last thing we'd like to ask is that we feel like the north end of the city has carried the weight of this, either through chairs. We've called all of our friends on the north end, and it seems like the last few chairs have come from the north end, so we just feel
it's
like
a factor of who the mayor is.
It
really is.
We're all tapped out.
So we would truly love input for those of you that know people more in the central or the south part of the city to give us names of people that we can use as chairs. So we hope to see emails in the next week or two. We would love any suggestions that you have of people that you think would serve well with regards to that. So, and then the last thing we wanted to mention is we listed everybody here that served on our 4th of July committee as far as these were the chairs for specific individual things. If you haven't already, if you know any of these people, we'd love for you to just reach out and express your appreciation for the service that they gave and invite them to do it again. Any questions for us?
Thank you.
You were incredibly organized. I said this for those of you who came to the volunteer dinner, but really organized, started early, got things really in line. It was like it was not a big deal because you did such a nice job planning ahead, and things really ran smoothly. Really impressed with the way you organized things, and were really positive with the other people on the committee, encouraging them.
But we know it is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
You just made
it look easy.
Well, it did help to have that invitation extended early so we could get, and we feel like, yeah, we'll be able to just hit the ground running again. But we have great people, so it was an honor to serve, and we're grateful we've got the time to do it.
It was fun.
So could you entertain a couple of questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
The thought has been expressed that it would be beneficial, and especially with you opening the door by serving a second term, so to speak, to have the following year's chairman work with you this year as assistants to provide some continuity. I would think that's something that we ought to try to engineer.
Yeah, it's great if you can get.
Well, but if they're so what you're really doing is calling the chairman
A year and a
for a future year out to be their
I have a
second.
couple people in mind on the south
Well-
end.
Good. Tammy, we'll look for your email.
I think it's possible if you can get enough chair support, that you could ask somebody to serve as the vice chairs with being chair-elect. And that's only possible if you have enough volunteer or enough suggestions of people we can contact, because we did kind of scrape by and we got great chairs, but we were kind of tapped out. So yeah, suggest, and we'll try it.
And then I guess the second thing is, and I hesitate to use the word complaint, but the one comment that was negative was the lack of floats in the parade. And I don't know what can be done to try to rectify that. I had actually put an application into Wells Fargo in October a year ago to get the stagecoach for our parade, and they danced and danced and danced, and we obviously didn't get it. I will do that again,
That's great.
but
That'd be great.
that's the one thing that we're somehow missing, and I don't know what to do about that, but I just comment.
The 24th of July parade actually made a change in their rules that made it difficult for their parade entries to come to our parade. And I forget the exact particular of what they changed, but there was I think they pulled back money if people participated. So there's something that they did that partly frustrated that.
Oh, really?
The last two parade chairs have attempted to do what they can. They've contacted people who are in the 24th of July. They've reached out to schools, businesses, churches, even were willing to give a little bit of a financial payment to help offset the cost of it, and just have not had a lot of success. But we'll continue to pursue options for that. Yeah, because everybody loves floats. But it's just, floats, I think, partly are so time-consuming and so expensive that nobody wants to do one unless they have to. And then the 24th seems to soak them up.
So did our float participate in the 24th parade in Bountiful? Mm-hmm. Well, then maybe we ought to at least threaten quid pro quo.
Well, I think the way that the Salt Lake celebration.
Oh, you think it's the Salt Lake parade, not the Bountiful?
Yeah, it's the Salt Lake parade. They assign stakes.
Oh, I know they do.
And they give you money for it, and then, and if they get it done in time, then they are happy to come to ours, if they get it done in time. But it's a little bit hard.
But 3 weeks is early.
Yeah, yeah. So.
And how long in advance of, how much notice are we giving people of the theme? Is that something that we could?
Many months.
Yeah, we had that.
I haven't really paid attention because I haven't tried to do it. So I kind of really like the theme we had this year, and I'm kind of.
We're going to keep the theme, actually.
Just keep the theme. It's heartwarming and apolitical, so.
It's the land.
Did you get feedback on the south to north?
Oh, people, first of all, the staging crew and the police loved it. Loved it.
So much more room.
Right, absolutely. I even spoke to the police chief and asked him, I said, if that land develops, is this a problem? He said, it will not be any problem to close off this street. It's a big wide street, we can stage it just in the street. So I think in the future, that can continue to go well. And for the most part, I think people were pleasantly surprised. The biggest fear that we had was that people were afraid here on the north end, you would all run out of candy. And they wouldn't get any candy. But then I think that fear was dispelled.
I ran out right as I crossed the finish line. So
that honestly was the biggest concern we heard from people. Is that, so we just heard good things about it. So.
Well,
Thank you very, very much. Fantastic work. You've served in
you.
many capacities for many years. We're excited you're willing to do it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Next on the agenda, we have some minutes that we need to review and approve. First, we need to ratify the changes to the Joint City Council Planning Commission work session minutes. I think those changes are really brief. If you had a chance to review them, if not, Jake can put them up on the screen.
They were highlighted.
And it was quite simple, and hopefully there won't be any objections to that.
Right there's one.
I only found one. Was there another change?
I think there was only one.
I only saw one highlighted.
Right there,
So that's the September 13th work session minutes. Anyone have any changes to the September 19th council work session and regular meeting minutes?
I had one sentence that I typed in instead of wrote in, so I'm not seeing it. Well, I think it'll be fine. Give me 10 more seconds, I'll just double check. My typing didn't show up, so that's all right.
So I entertain a motion to ratify the changes of the September 13th joint City Council Planning Commission work session minutes, as well as the September 19th council work session minutes and September 19th regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those three sets pass unanimously. 3 actions on the summary action calendar. Public utility and sidewalk easements for Quick Quack Car Wash, the property that will be coming next to Dairy Queen. The storm drain easement for Moto United, and a public utility easement for Terry and Celine Blake. Any of those you have questions about or want to take up?
Has the property transferred to Quick Quack, or is that still owned by the other property owner? The weeds, I've been getting complaints about the weeds in front of that property.
I don't know. Do you know, Lisa?
Who's responsible for that right now?
We can check. I don't know that it has transferred. They mentioned that they were hoping to close any time now, so, but I haven't heard specifically.
But we'll see what we can do.
I had a complaint also.
Yeah.
On the weeds?
Now, I will note, or I did note, Lisa, that not all of these have legal descriptions attached right now, but some do and some don't, right, in the list there?
Yes, I put a few of these on before the developers or applicants had actually given us the legal descriptions just to keep the ball rolling. And I received the easement and drawings for the Blakes this afternoon and the drawings for Quick Quack. So it's the Moto United one. We just don't have the legal yet, but I'll make sure to add that once it's been provided and checked by the engineer. But at least this step, you've accepted it, so.
So if there aren't any more questions, I'll look for a motion to accept those accept the 3 easements listed on the summary action calendar.
I would make a motion to accept the items on the summary action calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting these 3 easements?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a public hearing around general plan amendments for the southeast neighborhood in the Pages Lane commercial area. We'd like to start this with a staff report on the significant process that the Planning Commission has gone through the last few months before we open it up for a public hearing. Corey, would you provide us with that staff report, please?
Is there a map available by chance, just as zoning or Google Earth? As you indicated, Mayor, this is an ongoing process. We started with the southeast neighborhood. We started with the residential section. We passed that, I think, at the end or first of this year. The second item to address is the Pages Lane commercial area, and the last item for that district is Main Street, which you're already preliminarily underway with that, coming up in your work session in November. So we'll see how that plays out. But for now, you're looking at the Pages Lane area, and the Planning Commission did host several meetings, including a public forum, addressing residents, inviting residents, as well as business and property owners. They debated some early ideas in trying to flush out the issues that arise, particularly over parks, that came up in the public forum. They also, again, invited the property and business owners to have a session with them to receive their feedback. And ultimately, they have come up with some scenario to you. It has some alternatives inside the scenario. It was presented them in 2 different scenarios because the way they were looking at various options, they saw them as scenarios. really you have one scenario with a and a B option addressing the issue of park. So if you look at the Pages Lane area, what you'll see is the language no longer involves the northern side of Pages Lane. That has now been put into the residential section and addressing that. So the debate over the Bowling engineering and that commercial piece has resulted in residential, and so it's ended up in the residential category. So you do not see language addressing that. It'll be the southern side of Pages Lane running from Main Street to 400 East. Ultimately, what you're seeing is a division of that whole block area. So about midpoint, they're looking at 200 East, looking to that to the west to Main Street. Their recommendation is to continue the commercial uses. They saw the redevelopment of the gas station. The LDS Church is a significant landholder in that, has made a number of changes, expansions. It's been interior expansions, but they've made a number of expansions. They are underway with the lease on the Joann's Fabric has expired, and so the church is making some plans in expanding their services into that space now. And so the Planning Commission viewed that generally that western half area is a commercial place, and do not see in the next while of really transitioning that to a redevelopment scenario. Now, to note, the language does regroup. If you recall, the Main Street or the South Main Street overlay listed Pages Lane area as a gateway district. If you recall way back when this came about to look at redevelopment, the council returned temporarily, while you were studying Pages Lane, returned that western half, or actually the whole block area, to commercial high and eliminated the mixed use option in the south plan, suspended it, whatever you want to call it. This language, we reintroduce that back into that commercial area. So you have language to say on a long vision horizon, look at the Pages Gateway mixed use as potential opportunities as the commercial may go and shift through changes. It's hard to put time frames, but basically it's 5 years now, 5 to 15 years. If a need arises, the general plan is saying the mixed use concept may be possible. In crafting that language and knowing the tensions with the South Main Street area, staff included some other language or other type of scenario that may come about, knowing that the Pages Lane mixed use concept may not continue into the long future. So there would be some other alternative called commercial plan development option. So they are in their language saying commercial for now, as reinvestment occurs, think about other viable opportunities, whether it's alternative commercial or mixed use, allow that to occur for the long horizon. When you look at the eastern half, and this is taking basically where you have the U-shaped or the horseshoe-shaped suites. So you're looking at, this is the LDS Church properties, the 3D video and the pizza, and the gas station. That's the western half. Taking this U-shaped piece to the east, now they do have a couple of alternatives for that eastern block area. The discussion is in the past with the commission is park and cemetery space. You should be aware of that. Hopefully that's not a shocker to a subject to you. And the commission spent a significant amount of time putting pressure on staff to get some comparison numbers and try to wrap their minds around what's happened there. I think some of their shift, just kind of a FYI, when they had a work session or a discussion with the property owners and the business owners, there was a little bit of shift in the commission as a whole about how aggressive the park should be sought after. It was very aggressive at the beginning of their discussions to try to establish a park. The language reflects maybe a softening of that stance. That doesn't mean that they didn't want to park there. That just means that they softened it because they recognize that the property owners are in a place right this very moment of strategically making decisions about their property. So they felt like they needed to hustle it a little faster than they were moving to let that landowner move forward with some of their ideas and at least give them a direction. But ultimately, it is a redevelopment scenario to go to residential. They debated, there's some dissension on how much residential, what should it be. Some had talked about capping at a low. Others said, well, in the redevelopment scenario, you have to look at a medium. A low is probably problematic. You'll see the strikeout. Right now, we still have the range issues, and RM comes in and everybody starts at 8 instead of at 4. So they did strike out the 8 in this case. The agreement was to strike out the 8, but listed it as residential medium zone. So the whole conversion of the eastern half is to eventually move to the residential zone. They did establish a minimum element of change, so it wouldn't be just a 100-foot by 100-foot square converted to residential, one piece at a time. So they wanted to at least seed it with something substantial at first. That's occurred out of the discussion that you have the hardware store is is under a long-term lease. And so you may not see that transition as fast. But west of that, you might see that transition, and that's that 2-acre, rough 2 to 3 acre mark for developing. It's a total of 8 acres, a little over 8 acres on the eastern half, if you're wondering. So they did seed it to happen, to convert to a medium density type development. That places the commercial for now, if you were to ask yourself, commercial CH under this scenario stays in place. It's when somebody comes in and wants to request redevelopment opportunity for residential. So that's the way the language is drafted. This would be generally governed by the property owner coming in. It doesn't say property owner specifically, but it's not saying the city initiate that change. So I've had some discussions with a council member talking about, what would happen. Certainly the city could take the general plan language, adopt it as is, and initiate a change if you wanted to, but it's not asking for that. It's letting it happen when the moment is right to redevelop as residential. So I think that's important to understand. So the commercial would stay in place until a rezoning would happen, seeded with a couple of acres to start the development, understanding that some leases may affect how long it takes to attrition to residential. The options that come into that residential component was heavily debated. You have an option that talks about a city park. So the idea in the language is to explore a city park. So the way it's crafted in its language is before a rezone request is approved at any point in time, city initiated, private property or initiated. Before that happens, the city should investigate the opportunity for a park. And so that's what they're talking about. The debate on the size of the park was waffling back and forth. Some were saying, hey, it's 3 acres, because we studied the average neighborhood park, but that's kind of a skewed number on that size. So, ultimately, I think the commission was trying to say, if it's a city park, it has to be something significant and meaningful, not just a little pocket park that really is not meaningful. So I think that's the message of the commission on the park option is as you study it to be a meaningful park. Now, meaningful is broad. You had some saying, hey, skate parks, Thunder Mountain in St. George would be awesome. Pickleball courts was discussed, and it really didn't come down to exactly what it would be. Dog park was another one in that. But I think the overall recommendation is as you study it for a possibility of park, study it from a meaningful way. And then if that option doesn't come about in a meaningful way and you decide to eliminate it, then you could go in and just simply convert it to residential. The option B is an alternative to a park. This was driven out of early discussions with staff, talking about the valuation of the properties and the price level of those properties. How would you acquire it? If you take a significant portion of the property as a park, then that may be less meaningful for residential development. So the discussion was take the whole thing for a park, 50% of it for a park. What's left over for redevelopment that's meaningful? And so the early idea that was grown out of it and is included as an option B is a public-private feature. The concept of a public-private feature is if a significant area is redeveloped as residential, under our current ordinances, 50% of your open space, which is 40% of the entire project. So if you're looking at 8 acres of an entire project, theoretically developed at once, you're looking at a significant amount of acreage that has to be common to the project. So you have your yards, you have your streetscape, but you also have 50% of that green space is to be common featured green space. And so the idea is if you could couple in partnership with a feature where somebody had some density, the medium style is the recommended to you, it would generate some impact fees. Not a lot. They reviewed how much impact fees. $200,000 is 12 units an acre. So you're looking at $100,000, $90,000 to $100,000 worth of impact fees at a medium level. I think there's some numbers in the backup reports. But maybe using some of that park impact fee, since they already have to absorb costs of the land into the open space for the residential, that's an automatic requirement of the code. Then you could partner up with some impact fees or some other creative way to allow some public access as part of that feature. And whatever that feature may be negotiated with the city, whether that's a more passive space for people walking up and down the commercial area, whether it's a small dog park feature. We're yet to let the artistic palette fruit itself. But I think what's important in understanding about both the park and the feature is that it's slated in the language to be the buffer between the commercial and the redevelopment of residential. So whether it's a park or whether it's a feature, the strategic goal is to put it in the middle area between the two uses, not on the eastern end. That will play out some effect on the attrition of commercial, the long-term leases of the hardware and the area that could potentially developed, and then have to include this park or feature into that would affect how fast redevelopment would occur. So ultimately, they've asked they recommended approval, commercial on the west, conversion to residential, study a park. If it doesn't fruit out to a park, a meaningful park, I have to use that word, meaningful was important to Shaylin, then maybe study the possibility of partnering in a feature. And that's their recommendation to you.
Thank you, Corey. Before we open for questions, can you remind us of the overall process? This is a general plan amendment. It is not a zoning change.
Right. This would not institute zoning yet. As I indicated, it's neutral on, the city could choose to take the general plan and immediately implement it. At the same time, you could also choose in that neutrality to allow the landowner to attrition it. I think that's something, if it's worthy of debate, you should discuss. I think overall tone of the ordinance is it would attrition as the market desires.
But by making a general plan amendment, in your opinion, there's no requirement to make a zoning change immediately?
Not immediately, no. So it would leave the commercial high and intact for however long it takes to implement.
Not only does it not force a change immediately, but it doesn't even force that when a change does happen, it has to go this way. Would you say that's correct?
What do you mean go this way?
So it is still zoned commercial, and so if the property owners found that commercial redevelopment was viable, then it still could go that way, just because there's this option listed in the general plan as a reasonable option. It's not pushing us away from allowing an actual commercial use since it's still
Yeah,
zoned
and
commercial
so
high.
long as the city doesn't choose to implement the language of its own accord, it leaves the commercial intact to redevelop. Not good or bad, but the consequence of a neutrality is if there was viable redevelopment commercial, it would extend the horizon of that viability of that commercial, which may take longer to attrition to a residential, or it may ultimately just make residential non-viable, depending on how big the commercial reinvestment is.
Corey, I have another question. This goal number 2 on option A, prior to any rezoning or redevelopment scenario, the city ought to reconsider the southeast neighborhood's available park acreage and determine if additional park space should be secured. So this is interesting to me because it's saying that, as you emphasize, this needs to happen prior to rezoning or redevelopment. But in my opinion, unless we don't stall on it at all and do this immediately, then that's very unfair position to property owners and developers. If they come in interested in a project and then we say, great, glad you came to us, but our plan says we have to take this, what could be a very lengthy process, through. And so I see that as a risk and kind of an unfair requirement, because to do this thorough, I like how the wording is saying, make sure it's thorough, make sure you get all the information, and the cost numbers, for instance, will be important. But to require it, but without giving us a deadline to get to it. And so I'm seeing that we could possibly stall and then really put ourselves in a difficult position as far as being fair to property owners. And then my next question would be, let's say we do go through the process, then would you recommend that after going through that process, we immediately change the general plan language that we just put in place? Or is there the risk that we could get stuck in a loop if this general plan language stayed the same and then future councils were just constantly going through this process again and again?
Well, two thoughts to your question is, first, the commission's viewpoint. The commission, there was a strong enough sentiment of a few members of the commission that a park is a meaningful thing for this community. And so throughout the entire discussion, at least a couple of commissioners and some sympathetic commissioners said, yeah, we think salvaging some idea of a park, responding to the public. The forum asked for a park. And so they wanted, before, when you start looking at numbers, $525,000 to $575,000 an acre, it started dawning on the complexity of purchasing a park. So as that dawned on the commissioners, they realized that's a big task, and where is the money? And I think early on, a few commissioners wanted to try to get that decision for you. They wanted to get to the point where they could decide that for you. And I got in quite a bit of trouble saying that's not their role. And they said, well, we ought to know. And I said, well, you ought to know something, but ultimately that's the role of the council to decide. You decide the best land use pattern. And so this option that says ought to is a soft version instead of shalls and the shoulds and the mays. It's saying, first, you ought to look at this. We really want you to look at this. And there is this immediacy to it, because they did receive the feedback, even to the point is we're no longer in a contract with any property owners for conversion. We're moving forward with commercial. So that was stated to them in their discussion. And they said, well, immediacy about this park is a concern because we still think a park is something that should be looked at. But we finally agree, I don't think it was agree with Corey, I think it was we finally agree that making that decision is impossible at this point. So the ought to is, hey, take the initiative and look at it. And I think there's immediacy to that. Now it goes back to your option about the discussion of the loop. My view, and this is the dicey part of a general plan. General plans can be a guidance document through resolution. It can be an ordinance through mandatory, and we do kind of a hybrid. It's adopted, I think it's actually adopted by ordinance, isn't it, Lisa, the general plan?
Well, we adopt and amend it by ordinance, yes.
Yeah. But you have the implementation tools. Every time somebody comes in with development, you have a mandatory look at the general plan first as the guidance factor. And so you're right, there's the issue if somebody wants to come in with a development and we have not done the ought to, then your strategic plan is to say, we want to ought to first look at it, or this is a missed opportunity by us, or we've already kind of ought to it and decided we didn't want to do it. So I look at it as more of a lost opportunity. If you choose not to study the park and wait for a long time, you're kind of burning your own bridge about the general plan language if somebody's really ready to convert. And you'll have to make that strategic decision, which is a tough one. Do we stall you based on this general plan, or we just move forward as a lost opportunity? But I don't think it catches you in a loop over and over.
But what about
and
my
over.
part of the question of, let's say this council's very serious about seriously exploring all those questions, which my feeling is that they are, then after we've done that process, then do you recommend as our city planner that we go back and then change the language so that that constant recommendation to have it happen?
No, because you've considered it. The word's consider. What you wait for is that you recheck your, in theory, you would recheck your plan in 5 years, take a significant recheck at 10 years. And so you would take the language you ought to, and let's say you did it 2 years from now, and it came out to no go. Then theoretically, in another couple of years, you should be going back and refining some language and check some of those and eliminating them after you've considered them. But I don't think it's a repetitive loop over and over and over again.
Thank you. Other questions for staff before we?
Yes, one question, Corey, related to the language as it stands now. Do you see in your professional opinion that adopting this language has any impact on the property values as they stand today?
That's a tougher question.
Well, I wasn't going to ask you an easy one.
Yeah. You know, I can't, this would be more of an editorial than an expert opinion. You know, in the market, if it's eligible still for commercial uses, regardless of the general plan, generally the market is going to follow what's available in the immediacy of the zoning ordinance. You do have questions sometimes of appraisers of what's looking out to the long horizon. And so I think it's a strategic call on appraisal in the marketplace of the property. So long as it's commercial, it's going to be hitting pretty close to a commercial value, regardless of what the future is. There are some that investors come in and say, you know, I'm buying this property, but I'm going to hold it for 20 years, pretend. That's when they'll start looking in, you know, what are my options? What are the foreseeable constraints to be? And you could, in some sense, affect the value of the property. But I think the general plan is a general theory of relativity. It's when you start to implement it, you know, then we got the apple falling on Newton's version, and it hits everybody on the head and drops the property value. So if you just said, this is extreme. For YouTube, this is not the proposal. But if you said rezone to open space, if that's what you were saying, and you came back and rezoned it for open space, yeah, that's a drastic hit on the property value.
So the differentiator between shall and ought, in your opinion, gives you enough leeway to not drastically impact the property value one way or another?
That's why we chose the soft version of that. Instead of a shall, it's an ought, and if it disappears, it's a lost opportunity. Now, legal, in a court, if I'm arguing before a judge, I don't know if the definition of a shall, ought, may, wish, should really means.
No, in my opinion, as I read this, I see that it just opens up other opportunities, since we're not actually dictating a change in the zoning map at this time. Did the Planning Commission discuss putting in language that also allowed such flexibility as mixed use, if someone wanted to come in and propose commercial and residential working together within these same density?
Only on the west side.
Only on the west side. It wasn't even discussed as keeping it open as a
No, there was
possibility
early
on the
talk
east
of, should we maintain some commercial? Chair Hersey was probably the proponent of the early talk of, should we preserve some commercial for the future?
Like some
Particularly
corner
for
lots
your
or
corner
something,
lots or
uh-huh.
something like that. Should we look at potentially mixed use? And that just fell off of the scenarios.
Thank you. This matter is scheduled for a public hearing, but let's have another question before we move to
Looking at your map, there's 4 parcels or 5
In the whole project?
in the east half?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 8.1 acres, I think.
Okay, and so the hardware, so the parcel on the corner is the pizza place.
Right.
The hardware store is the old Dick's
The old Dick's is here.
part, so that wall between those 2 buildings is in effect on the line.
Yeah, I think you got the hardware here.
And then the empty theater, and then the U buildings.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's an interesting scenario for whoever owns the property as they demo the party wall issues, the closeness to property lines, and now it's a separated building, so there's needs to be a buffer distance to the property line for fire codes. So I think in a redevelopment scenario, the property owners will have to address some significant issues on keeping a portion of a building and demoing the rest. And I don't know the internal construction, if it's already pre-built that way or not. I doubt it, but I don't know.
question. If there are no objections, we've got some property owners here who I think would like to speak to us. I'd like to thank staff for that report. And let's go ahead and open the public hearing and invite those present to speak to the general plan amendment that's being proposed and share with us their comments, after which the council can decide how they want to proceed. So if you, please.
Okay. Would you like a?
If you don't mind, yeah, I have this. Could you?
I'll give that to him.
Have a file on this. It says Pages Lane Park. If you wouldn't mind, bring that up. I'm going to stick this before your eyes for a minute and then talk to you about a few of the details. Will that do? I think that'll do. Okay. Can you see that okay? All right.
YouTube can't see it very well, but we can.
No, they won't be able to see it.
Camera back there.
We're just going to make your document a public record.
Put the document up as well, and it's the same thing.
Okay.
Great.
Hello, Council. My name is Buck Swaney. I'm here representing Deca Properties and also speaking today in behalf of the Weininger brothers. I am an AICP city planner and a planning consultant by trade. I'm also a land developer by trade. And so I walk an awful lot of these sorts of settings, and for fun, on every other Thursday, I'm the chair of the Murray City Planning Commission. And so all of the different angles from which we approach a question like this, I'm extremely familiar with it all. What I want to do, there was a file in there, I'm sorry, it was called Pages Lane Park. It was right in the open part of the directory. What I want to do is start with addressing a few of the key issues, and the simplest thing, if I were to kind of start with where we think we want to land as property owners, that continued future land use, it's not zoning, but it's a future land use designation on the west side of this commercial corridor that allows for mixed use kind of progression. We would like to just simply see that same future land use applied to the whole entire corridor. It creates a lot of flexibility. It creates a lot of opportunity. It allows us to have economic use without worrying about some real true dangers. Now I'm going to lay out a scenario that creates the kind of danger we're talking about. Let's say that there were some sort of vandalism or arson, or one of the buildings caught on fire and burned down and had to be removed. And then we had somebody come in, and we had already changed the future land use to residential. And when you say medium density residential, in your definitions, that can be as low as 4 units per acre. That's quarter-acre lots. Very, very low density by medium density standards. And so our building burns down, and we come in, and we have somebody who wants to replace that commercial building. Now, the first thing that has to happen is your staff has to go through the process of reviewing whether our application to replace our commercial building is compliant with the general plan. And the answer will be a resounding no. The general plan says this place is supposed to transition to residential development over time. And so we're already in the back seat, we're already in an uphill battle to deal with, and there will be disagreement about some of the details.
You're in a non-conformity burn down, that should be built.
Okay. But as we look at doing our application processes, as we look at doing, but we have a non-conforming situation. When we talk about the land value question is also different. When we're trying to sell and package a commercial property to developers, and they look at the current zoning, and they look at the future land use, and they see that the whole entire thing is supposed to transition over time to residential, they don't want to pay commercial values. They've lost the insurance policy that the long-term value and use of this place is protected by the zoning program that's in place. And so from a developer's viewpoint, there's really nothing about this progression that's desirable. And I could state, I think categorically, that nobody who owns property in this corridor being considered for this future land use amendment, nobody agrees with it. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody sees it as beneficial. Nobody sees it as being helpful to progressing with the transformation of the property. So those are the key points I want to start with. What I want to move to, I think, is more important, and that's that we want to help transform this place. We want to help get a city park in this place. We want to help do the things that the citizens want to see done there. But we don't want to have a toolkit that's narrowing to do that. We want to have a toolkit that's broadening a little bit. And so one of your options is to talk about public-private partnerships. And what you see rendered up here is a concept, and it's a little bit difficult to see maybe from that distance. I feel a need to kind of scoot that up a little bit for you. But we took that front area out in front of, which is right now just a sea of parking.
Buck, you could come over here
Yeah.
and speak from this mic and have a pointer if you'd like. It would help.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, can you zoom that in a little bit?
Let's kind of just zoom in the park area up there. And I'm gonna kind of yell, so hopefully the recorder picks me up, okay? So this park area here that's outlined, right now it's 100% asphalt. It's just parking that's vacant. It's not good to look at. We can see why the residents don't like looking at it, et cetera. That outline here is about 1.9 acres, barely shy of 2 acres. And here's what we fit in it, and it is all properly scaled. This was done by a professional park planning landscape architecture firm. We're able to fit 4 pickleball courts, a full-scale splash pad, a full-scale custom playground, a multi-use stage, and a big open play area, lots of grass. You can fit a ton of stuff in a properly designed 2-acre park. That's what we could put into this if we're careful and thorough about designing it. As a public-private partnership, there would be some things that we need to accomplish. And if I'm kind of going to try to send you away with a little bit of a sense of what it is that this group desires, what we would like to see is the land use, the future land use, just left alone for now, for long enough for the development community and the property owners to come back with you and engage you in looking at a specific site plan and looking at a development agreement that would allow us to flexibly do this and see if we can get a win-win for everybody. See if we can get a really nice functional park, see if we can get some residential in there that supports economic use of the land, and see if we can adjust a couple things that allow us to reuse. And this would be a great place for an adaptive reuse of a building. I'm not going to say the words out loud, but there is a way for us to really economically use that and to screen it so that it looks great and it works great and it is an asset to the community. So we would like enough time to come to you with some specific proposal work, perhaps a development agreement that allows us to enter the public-private partnership without being under the constraint of a moving target with this new future land use amendment. So that's where we're coming from, and I'd like to give a moment for you to ask me some specific questions if you have any.
Define what you mean by enough time. What type of horizon are you looking for?
This is something that we could take care of right away, immediately. We could begin immediately working on sitting down, master planning the site, getting some sense of buy-in or approval from you. We're talking, this is something that in the coming weeks we could accomplish.
What's the total acreage of the project owners the owners that you represent and what this project would entail?
It's a total of approximately 8 acres overall.
So you would pull in everything
Yeah,
on the
so-
east end?
So we would bring everything in. We would look at the buildings that we want to keep in their current use, the ones that we want to adaptively reuse, the ones that we want to tear down and replace with something else, and then how we would go about allocating that park space and designing it. And we would definitely look to the city as a partner to make sure that we had the kind of design for that park, the kind of amenities for that park that you think your community needs, that your current parks are lacking, and that can be absorbed in this site plan.
Mm-hmm. And so I have a question for staff, I guess, if that full 8 acres is pulled in and the underlying zone is still commercial high, then applying the PDO process would work in this situation, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Just addressing one so there's clarity. It is true that if a use went away over 12 months and abandoned, they would have to come back with a general plan. The scenario of a burn down is protected by state law, so they could rebuild as they originally were. Does that benefit anybody? No, just a clarity of that you're not afraid of the planning based on the nonconformities issues. So they'd be able to rebuild their commercial as it was when it burned down.
And the non-conforming is just assuming if we actually changed the zoning as well.
The question will be, is it cost effective to do that? That's a different
Like
question.
that benefits no one. What benefits everyone is an improved use.
You know, the issue that I think you have on the table is that you left it only to CH zoning. So the question.
To what?
Right, as you amended the zoning ordinance, you left it only as CH zoning. So there's no opportunity than commercial high zoning right now. And so there's no way to use a PDO or other creative tool right this very moment to enable a creative mixed-use type scenario unless you reinstituted the Main Street plan mixed-use options.
I don't understand.
That's very confusing to me.
Yeah, why can't, we have an ordinance that says any parcel over 5 acres in size, we can.
That's commercial.
But it's commercial planned, and if you use a commercial plan, you have to have a general plan assignment of density. You have no general plan assignment of density for this project. This project.
So you're saying the PDO only applies on what zoning? Not commercial?
Well, you
It
have 3
absolutely
different
does apply
types,
to
but so an
commercial.
example is that your commercial, so this would be a commercial plan because it's CH.
Yes.
In the PDO, it says if you want to do any type of mixed use, you have to first assign it through the general plan. The only place that you've assigned it in the general plan in a commercial area is the west side.
Okay, so we want to do it, if we want to do a PDO.
I was asked, could we do it now? No,
change-
the
okay.
answer is you have to change
Change
something.
them. Well, this is what we did before, we changed.
We
Right,
changed
but again, you're leaving it as a legislative decision if what they want to do. I think what they're saying is hold off on this general plan amendment. We're going to come back with a better idea and then have you consider that general plan amendment
Right.
along with a rezone or a development agreement. So, yeah, but you're still retaining the legislative decision on that general plan amendment.
Right.
Yeah, but you would not be able to move past the general plan so you could not enter a development agreement for a specific project yet
Sure.
until the general plan is changed.
Of course, yeah.
But so you're asking us to do nothing right now?
I am asking you to not take action on this proposed general plan amendment tonight. We would like to have the opportunity to explore with you making the general plan amendment that moves us back into a mixed-use category, consistent with what's on the west side of the corridor, so that we can move into an agreeable path forward in a public-private partnership with you.
Why do you say back into?
Maybe back was an incorrect word.
No,
I
back is correct,
apologize, but-
because in the original South Main Street corridor, this was the South
This is the Pages Lane Area
Pages Lane
Gateway.
District that included the mixed use.
And the whole thing was mixed
Was it?
use. Remember, it had a density cap to it and all other parameters. That was taken away
Okay.
at some point in time.
Yeah.
So back was the correct
Sorry.
word.
Buck, a couple of times you've used the word economical.
Yeah.
And these pictures of parks and trees and turf is really beautiful, it's really nice, but those type of amenities cost millions of dollars. And can you talk for a minute what you mean about economical and how you make this work?
Yeah, so
Because you're not going to just donate millions of dollars for
so
nothing.
that's the public part of this project. If we're talking about a PPP, a public-private partnership, on our side, there's going to be things that we need to accomplish, give, and provide, and on your side, there will be too. And what we're trying to do is enter a situation where nothing here is being done adversely. It's all being done willingly. It's all being done collaboratively, and everybody leaves the place feeling good about how we did business and what the outcome was. So that's where we want to go. To be sure, if the city wants to obtain this parcel, convert it into park, parks cost money to build. That'll be a capital expense that the city needs to budget for. But in the public-private partnership, we can free up the land to take care of that desire the public has to have a park there.
And what would motivate you to do that?
The need to have economic reuse of the land.
Which means?
Which right now, if we proceed down this path that we're proceeding down, of putting the future land use
Which one? The one we have on the agenda or the one you're talking about?
The one that you
Let's
have on the agenda.
talk about what you've got on your thing instead.
You want to talk about this instead of the agenda? Okay. So,
Well, don't we have to be careful about?
We're talking about the agenda, but we're happy to hear your comments if
Yeah.
you have a different proposal, but.
yeah, okay. So my comments were, you asked a question about this being economic.
Right.
There's a break point for redevelopment. I think a lot of people commonly misunderstand. Redevelopment doesn't occur very often because it's really expensive to do. If redevelopment was as affordable as greenfield development, we'd be doing it everywhere all the time. But there's a reason that houses deteriorate, the commercial properties deteriorate. It's because redevelopment's expensive. And so if you want to induce redevelopment, you need to create some tools out there for the development community. Increased density in the right kind of way is something. Giving us a more flexible commercial land use opportunity is definitely something. When you start to make it so that we can begin to make these properties profitable again, then for us to move some of that other space affordably into your domain is something that we get willing to do. All right, so there's a lot of details that we'd have to work on to get us all the way through this agreement process. However, we think that we can create economic use of the land if we can adjust a couple of things here, and we also think that we can get for Centerville City and its citizens what they want with a nice park. And so work to do, yes, but we want the opportunity for the creative space.
And right now, you're looking at not demolishing the building, but using it for something else, the Big Dick's part.
Yeah, so yes. So we continue to look for companies, the right kind of companies that can come in there. To remind you or refresh you, the Ace Hardware still has 17 years on its lease. There are several other leases that are long-term, and the Weiniger brothers just sold that little building in front over here.
Where the pizza is?
To a nail salon, and
The former Zion's Bank.
Former Zion's, yeah. And so there you've probably created a new long-term land use obstacle. And so the other part of this that's really worth talking about is that the longer this goes on, you're in a situation where there's kind of an open window, and we can pitch the ball through it. We can get some great stuff done right now. But the longer we wait, the more of these long-term leases are going to come online, and the longer the transition from what you've got now to what you really want is going to take. That could turn into decades. Right now, it's almost 2 decades until the longest lease is cleared off of here. The longer we piddle around, the longer that term until we're free and clear is going to be.
Well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. The trick that I would say is that the what we really want question was difficult to answer to begin with, and the residential discussion started with a proposal that we saw, and the difficulty with that was the hodgepodge feeling of just sticking it there in the middle and not having a plan for a transition that makes sense. So that's what would lean me towards wanting to wait, is that I was feeling really uncomfortable with the fact that the Planning Commission did a lot of great work, but they came back with a plan that still didn't really give us a really good feel and way of how to mix the commercial and the residential uses, and so they were going to be really hodgepodge for a very, very long time if we did allow it. So.
Well, I would respectfully submit that we should probably finish the public hearing process and then debate this.
Sure, sorry about that.
So what are the other uses that you're talking about?
In terms of commercial, I'm going.
And I can't.
Yeah, so
I
I'm
can't
sorry.
see that
I'm,
far.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to point at a couple things. And I'm
Sure.
with understanding that I'm going to use a word that makes you all take a deep sigh and breathe out loudly. I'm going to go ahead and say it and be direct about what works, okay? And we're trying to couch this all in what works. Over on this side of the property, which we can't see now, you have a 17-year lease in place. Chances are that it's going to stay something like it is now. The property will be upkept. But when you get to this building renovation project that's the former Dick's, the most economic use of that building right now pretty clearly is to do a really high-quality indoor storage project. That's something that, as you can, if you screen it right, if you do a good job with it, it will be even less innocuous looking than the current Dick's market is. It's something that we can make effectively disappear, and they are 100% leased all the time, which means that even if people don't like them, they want them, and they use them. And so it's something that we would want to build into here because that's something we know we can make succeed very quickly, and it also creates the economics for us to do significant property upkeep. As we move over here, can we scroll up just a little bit on that? We like the idea of kind of transferring some of the density in the site over to one pod rather than having duplexes or triplexes or stacked homes all along the place, consolidating all the residential to one really nicely done, and carefully screened residential project. We counted a very comfortable 24 units fit in there. We could put enough landscaping in front of it that it would be literally invisible from the street. You wouldn't be able to see it from the street. You probably wouldn't even be able to see it from the park unless you really tried. So these are a couple of uses that if we could put them in play as part of a public-private partnership, we'd be able to be really comfortable that we could, in the next 12 months, really do the whole entire transformation. 12 months, and we could have this whole thing done.
That assumes we have money to build a park, which we don't.
But the parkland would be there.
So we have money to build a park.
So for 10 years, we've been sucking wind out there trying to figure out how to make this go, and we have a way to do it. And what we have to do is just forge an agreement that makes it possible.
So how many story unit?
Marv, off the top of your head, how many units do you think we would fit inside of there?
You said 24, but how many
Oh, do you mean
stories?
How many stories?
Stories? It would be 2 stories. I'm sorry, I apologize.
We have one right now that was exactly like this. It's called
The Park.
It's 555 South First East and Bountiful. It's highly landscaped. It sits way back on the street. We have a waiting list a mile long.
What's the address?
555 South.
100 East.
100 East. Just east of Little Caesar's Pizza.
Is that the senior living? Is senior living the
It's
intention?
next to the senior living complex. Just tucked around behind it, yeah.
And it's the same amount of units?
It is 16, but it's the same design and layout that we would have, and the size differential would be very, very small. It wouldn't take very much more footprint space to turn it into 24.
If you looked at it, if you went and looked at it, you would show.
We need you to come up to the
Marv,
mic
would
if
you
you're
mind
making
just coming to
comments.
the mic? Keep us compliant with law, keeps our attorney happy, and we like to keep her happy.
I think we're a little past compliance right now. Just I'm uncomfortable.
Marvin Blosh, I'm part of the DICA group that's here. The property I'm talking about is 555 South First East and Bountiful. The Park Apartments is a garden-type apartment, 2 stories. It's just beautiful. Go by and look at it. We have a long waiting list. Today, most of the apartments you see built in your city are what, 3 and 4 stories? They're down by the freeway or by the rail corridor, and they're just straight up in the air, and they're kind of an affront to aesthetics, in my opinion. Go look at this place, and you'll say, oh, yeah, that's a garden-type apartment. I wouldn't mind living there. And that's what we have. We have mostly seniors, a lot of professional people. It's just a great, beautiful apartment complex. And we'd love to do more there eventually. If the uses over time, large building change, in the future, that maybe could be expanded, and we could do more of those same types of units if that could be incorporated into the development agreement.
The I appreciate your comments. I think it's totally appropriate to say we want mixed use. This is our goal. I'm trying to understand your comments and direction. Hey, we like the mixed use. With the action you just said that we sold part of this for an ongoing commercial use, what would motivate you to be trying to go towards a mixed use type of a thing and then sell off a parcel to keep the existing buildings in place?
So I think, I'll be careful to answer, but the bottom line is this is economics, and those properties have sat underutilized for too long. They cost money to maintain and to take care of, and an opportunity to sell one piece of the property for a proper sale price came along, and it was something that the Weiniger brothers chose to exercise. Had we had a program like this built a couple of months ago or a few months ago, that sale might not have happened. And so this is a window, and it's open, and we want to engage it very, very seriously and collaboratively with you.
Thank you. Any other comments to share as we're part of the public hearing?
I just want to make sure that we've answered all of your questions for now.
I'd say we've answered more questions than we are legally allowed to do at this point. I'm going to restate for the record, I'm very uncomfortable with the direction we've taken in a public hearing. I think there are options that would be available in terms of motions that can be made, but I'm just cautioning my fellow council members that I think we've blown beyond reasonable in terms of a public hearing for the context of what we're doing.
Can I make one further comment?
Yes, please.
Just to back up what Buck has said, in terms of mixed use, this thing works pretty well. We were in here 8 months ago with a proposal by the Pugsley Group, which in my opinion was nice. I understand the councilwoman's comments about sticking it in the middle, but if you compare that with what's before you today, this really is more, in my opinion, of a mixed-use development. Even the property was just sold by the Weiniger brothers, as well as the one that's up on the corner, the old pizza place, and you have some residential down in the corner, you have the Ace Hardware. It really is a mixed-use development. And if we could get into that, fit into that definition and take care of our long-term lessees, Fred Hale's doing a nice job up there with the Ace Hardware. And we've got a legal obligation. He's going to be there a long time. And we start downzoning the property around him, that's going to have a significant impact, and it's going to turn the direction of what we're doing that corner into an area that I think is going to be pretty tough. But if you look at this kind of proposal, it meets different economic needs, and it'll make this place sing. And it takes 9 months to make a baby. We've been into this 8 or 9 months already, and now we're talking about going through this process further and longer. And so I'm totally ignorant of all the legalese. I'm sorry, the hoops you have to jump through I know are difficult, but we've got an opportunity to make this work, to make it look good, and to do it. And my only plea tonight is let's don't waste it. Otherwise, we'll be back here in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, arguing about the same things. So good luck. And thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during this public hearing? If not, I can close this portion of it and leave it to the council to decide if they want to leave the public hearing open or for further discussion or close it permanently.
Given the context of where we're at, I would like to ask staff a question, specifically Corey.
So I'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for discussion and other questions. And in my opinion, it's not inappropriate to ask property owners involved questions if the council has it. Lisa, do you see any objections to that?
It's up to the council.
Okay, thanks. Question for Corey.
Okay, Corey, here's your theoretical. If I were to put a window around tabling this action to a future date to allow you the appropriate time to study, come back with a recommendation, and to interact with the property owners on a potential concept, whatever that is, what would that window be that you need? 90 days? 120 days?
No, it's the concept of where you want to go. If you're saying I want to place and table on hold this proposal, so you're placing it in a table situation, to resurrect it back, I think we would have to talk very quickly. So I think we would have to talk within a month and a half to explore what their ideas are, what the uses are, what kind of language changes could be, so that I can wrap my mind around where it's going. Because I think it's rather complicated. There's a land use component that I think I can address and understand and wrap my mind around and see if we're coming back to the council and discussing it and asking for a man back and restudy it and look at if you want to have their input on the proposal of the general plan language and so forth, I think can happen fairly quickly. My gut is it involves capital improvements and funding and stuff that I'm going to be completely unable to address any short period of time.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with tabling it because I've been given enough information tonight that I would need some time to.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail related to this.
But not even with that. Just, I mean, all of the information I've given,
Right.
I would need some time now to do some investigation, to talk to, people to find out, to understand it fully before I could make a decision on it.
Well, and just to weigh in on George's question, this is a city-initiated application. So you can certainly table this. We table items all the time and say you either want more information or you need more time to think about it, so you can certainly table it. Usually we recommend that you table it to a date certain because then we don't have to renotice. So everybody's on board that's been keeping track of this. But we also have projects where we just say, we need some time, and so when we bring it back, what we're going to do is renotice it and continue the public hearing, so that when something completely new comes back, or not completely new, because we're still using the old noticing, but when it comes back in a new version, people can comment on that. Now, as staff, we've also recommended if the new version is so completely different, then we just start over and we say, okay, as part of this, we're either going to table it and let it die, or you can put it on the agenda and specifically deny it, or handle the new one. So I don't know if you're struggling with, hey, how long can we leave this open?
I'm not struggling with how long we can leave this open. I recognizing that this property has been vacant for a while, but there's an identified potential opportunity. Rather than shut down a property owner, I prefer to, as much as possible, work with property owners. The flip side is I don't want it being an open-ended question trust me, I'm going to get back to you on a plan, and it never goes beyond a concept drawing.
Right, but the city is in the driver's seat.
Well, I understand that.
This is your
But that's why I'm saying, from my perspective, if I say this table's for 30 days, then there needs to be an answer, if the council agrees, in 30 days, one way or another, to either resume this process or to, vote it down at that point.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked the time horizon, because if I said table to the next meeting, Corey just passes out. Then,
next meeting would be tough.
Yeah, so it was more in deference to what the staff.
Right. And that makes sense, but we have also, I don't know if you recall the Walmart process, but it took
2 years.
many,
6 months for approval.
6 months, but we would table the entire thing, and then we would deal with the traffic. We would table it, but on this one, you could certainly table it to a date certain, whether that's a month or 3 meetings out, and we just put it on the agenda and give you an update, and then you table it again.
Yeah,
the
hard part I see, and it's really the property owners in the driver's seat for the further study. From my perspective, I need to know what uses, what densities, what's going on, so that I understand how the language have to be drafted and taken care of. But the other question will be coming back to the council. Are we ready in a month and a half to discuss density, capital improvement costs, the partnership with the city, in order to draft the new language and decide whether you proceed with it or remand it back to the commission?
Well, I think
it's a
that
significant change.
just as the economics play into the developer's decision, the economics is going to be the bottom line for the city as well. And so not only when it comes back do we need a little more clear numbers on, is this property being gifted, is it being sold, et cetera. And then we also have time to have our work session about the island view issue, and all of that, and play with some hard numbers on that property as well.
Because my honest opinion is mixed use can be a very great tool. And they participated in the process, and it took to this point for them to come up with such a suggestion. I applaud them for the efforts. This is great. And we could have a win.
Yeah.
But the cost of that win is where I assume things will be difficult.
Yeah.
If I had the broad brush tool and felt comfortable, I think we could have taken something to the Planning Commission as creative. But I didn't have the confidence, nor the commission had the confidence, that the density exchange and the capital improvement costs for such a plan were there. So we stayed within what we figured was the reality check. So I think, yeah, and I don't know how the public will respond to the consequences that this takes, good or bad.
So council,
One of the concerns that I have, and I guess I'd like to remind several of us, and to the extent that it plays into their hands, great. I believe that it's foolish to try and vote on something the same night as the public hearing.
Right.
So that gives us at least 2 more weeks.
Bill, could you speak up a little? I'm having a hard time
Beg your
hearing you.
pardon. I said, I believe that it is foolish to try and vote on something at the conclusion of the public hearing because everybody walks away thinking, well, they knew what they were going to do. So that gives us at least 2 weeks. We do have a meeting on, pardon? We do have a meeting in 2 days on the one other issue that Tammy just referred to.
Can you do it in 2 days? No.
to be realistic, I think you really ought to consider it, ought to table it for a month or for
At
6
least.
weeks.
That's
Well,
why
I-
I'm-
yeah,
I
no.
think the question is, how long do we need to figure out, is this a serious proposal?
Is it
or
is
not?
it serious and is it viable?
Yeah, exactly right. It's obviously serious, but is it viable? And
So I would actually, let's kind of crystallize this a little bit and say I would like to table the ordinance, or the vote on the ordinance for 30 days with the staff instruction that we have an update at the next council meeting as to the viability of the project, potential rezoning, and then we come back to it on the.
I think he could give you the parameters of the expectation, the viability.
Well, when I say viability, if you're going to tell me it has a 20% chance of success, given what was presented to you, that changes what I'm thinking. If you tell me we're 60-40 and we can get there, that's totally different. So as far as viability, I guess what I'm looking for is that, given that this is not the right forum to hear that, and you hear a proposal in your professional opinion, it's not going to work, whether that's economics, density, all the professional experience you have in this city, then it would be helpful to hear what your interim ideas are at the next council meeting.
Would you feel more comfortable with the next one, or would you rather have a month?
You want the full 30
Well,
days.
part of the driver is the property owner and what they're willing to disclose on what their terms are.
I think we ought to go 30 days, 30 days, because I don't think.
Because
you
if
can
it's
have
just
that much
land
for us.
uses, they can tell me the density that they expect, how it's going to be absorbed, the
Okay.
uses they expect, how it's going to be absorbed. And I certainly can tell you what I think we've heard about the whatever levels of that is. Be honest with you, if I'm sitting in their shoes, I'm not sure that I'm going to give the planner all of that information that quickly, because they want to preserve an opportunity to make their case about that and why they think it's a viable. I mean, right now, I can tell you, if it comes in with more than 8 units an acre, it's an uphill battle, unless you change your mind. But my experience with this council, 8 units an acre is too much.
It's still pushing it far, yeah.
So, mixed use, we can make it. We can make the economics. We can get the park. But how much is the participation of the city in that partnership?
One of the complaints that we had over a certain piece of property on the west side, which I shall not name, was the way density was calculated. Did anything change in the calculation of density since then on a parcel? It didn't, did it?
No.
Are you talking about green
Well,
space?
you've got two different densities in the city. You've got the west side commercial plan density. It's 15 units an acre for the entire project. That's the density for the entire, all mixed use. But then you have your residential multifamily densities. And this is proposing something in the multifamily category as mixed use into commercial. You're going to have to come up with what should that density be for the project versus the net, and how is that perceived against the multifamily density of 4, 8s, and 12s. You're on the 12s in this case. So you're working between, you're above 8, you're looking at 24 units net out on a piece of property, you're looking at 16.
Yeah, but
I
guess my question is, the one on the west side got approved where it is substantially more dense than 8 on the space that was built because of the open space. There's a lot of open space here.
The commercial plan assigned 15 units an acre.
Right, but are you talking about the west side, or are you talking about Porter's Lane?
I'm talking about Porter's Lane.
Yeah, see, he's not going the west side.
Yeah. West side, I'm out there by the.
I knew you were.
I'm sorry, I'm talking Avoca.
It wouldn't be different. It's 8 units an acre for RM, gross acreage.
Okay, so let me modify, pull back, and restate the motion.
Yeah. Thanks.
I would motion that we table the vote on ordinance 2017-26, general plan amendments for 30 days.
May I suggest 35 days, because you have 5 weeks before you have a meeting in 2 weeks.
30 days.
Then 3 weeks after that.
How about the first meeting?
Just to the November 8th
in November.
meeting.
I'm going to go with the November 8th meeting.
Okay.
November 8th or 1st?
Is there a second?
You said 8th, right?
Well, yeah, 30 days is November 2nd.
The
November
first regularly
7th
scheduled meeting in November.
is Election Day, so it's going to be on a Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
First meeting in November.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's moved in second. We table this to the first meeting in November. Before we vote on this, is there any further direction you want to give to staff as part
Is that
of
thumb
this?
drive that he gave you available that we can have access to the files?
You can put that file on your desktop or just otherwise.
We're required to do anyway by law. Anything that's electronically proposed in a council meeting has to be retained as a record.
I had a cookbook on it too, so maybe we'll get that too.
Don't get greedy, Robin.
I just want to say it's kind of a funny situation, because the reason that the city is looking at something is that the property has sat for so long, and we felt like we needed to take some action and decide what to do. So it's a good thing that the property owners have an idea of what they want to do with it. So in that case, it feels a little awkward to say, wait, we need a little more time. And I believe that my job as a council member is that I'm not supposed to have seen that. Because I was voting on this, but it's okay. I feel comfortable saying the property owner has an idea and would like to continue with their current zoning for a little while and see if this works out. I'm comfortable with that.
Well, and the reason I made the motion is given the grand scheme of time that's passed, this is not an unreasonable amount. Project irrespective, the property owner says, I have a proposal I'd like to look at with your planner. That seems reasonable to me. I just became uncomfortable when we started talking numbers and layout, and just like, I can't hear this part. Because then I'm biasing my vote based on a project, that I don't see or shouldn't see.
You're too pure.
So the motion on the table is to table this general plan amendment, 124802, or the section 124802, until the first meeting in November. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll see you, we'll have this discussion again in November. We appreciate you putting so much time and effort into these comments. Really, we can tell how much you want to make a difference here. Thank you.
It's not good, it's fine.
We do have a number. Do you want to take a break now, or you want to continue move forward?
No, I was going to have Robin just run out in the hall and then run back.
Could we have a 3-minute break.
You're not, this
Well-
council's not capable of a 3-minute break.
Well, there's no audience. We can do 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Next on the agenda, if you're willing to proceed with the agenda, is the William R. Smith Park Signage Design Services. And I'm not sure who wants to give us a quick report on what happened today with the consultant.
Do you want to do it?
I can go ahead and start. First of all, at the meeting we had, I had to apologize because I did not realize what the sign was on the park, and I had that brought to my attention. Somebody felt like they'd been scammed when I'm out there telling them it's going to be $10,000 to replace the sign, and I hadn't even been and looked at the sign, and they send me a picture going, really, you want $10,000 to replace this piece of wood? And I'm like, let me go look at it. So that was a very awkward situation for me, and I should have gone and looked at it before I went out there, but I just was told it was $10,000, so I went with that. So going from there, we talked about several different plans. I personally...
You can put some of these up if you'd like.
Okay.
The ones that we have online. Anyway.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and put the first one up?
Well, we don't have that.
Well, sure, you have the one. Okay, it's all right.
But you can show it to them if you want.
So, well, I think you've all seen it. It's just the original sign. I struggle with wanting to put a lot of money in a big plaza down on the bottom of the park. Now, this was interesting because I call it the bottom of the park and Tammy calls it the top of the park just because of our different, I mean, to me, when I go to the park, I pull into the top of the park and I have to walk to the bottom. She felt the other way around. But we already have a kind of plaza there, and I don't see it being used very often. I don't really ever see anybody there. So my contribution was I was a little concerned about putting that much money into a plaza. One part of the plaza was a kiosk with our trails and stuff on it. It was over $6,000 for that. I don't know that I would ever walk to what I call the bottom of the park to look at that kiosk. And I just don't feel like, I mean, I had never even noticed the sign, and I've lived here a long time. So when I'm driving, I'm having to watch Parrish Lane. There's a lot of traffic right there. So I'm not sure that...
You didn't notice the park sign?
No, I have never noticed that park sign. So I was, like I said, I was shocked when they're telling me it's just a piece of wood that's got to be changed, and we're glad to do that. So we even had somebody who volunteered to redo the wood. So I'm kind of like, oh, wow. You know, to my concern is we already have a plaza down there around the Pioneer thing. So my suggestion was we needed to come back to the council and get some more direction from you before we decided to go get more money. Now, Tammy had a few other ideas, so let's put hers in.
Yeah. Let me see. Okay, so I gave Robin a little bit of history that there were two things that kind of happened at the same time that spurred the drawing of some improvements on this end of the park, which I call the front end, not top, but. And yeah, I pointed out to Robin that for someone who lives just east of the park, she's always going to enter that way, but this is a major corridor where not only many, many cars drive by, but walkers, runners, bikers, and that is our most busy bus station in the city, bus stop. So, so two things happened at once. One was that Steve and Bruce and I were talking about the state of the existing awkward, very large flower bed that holds the existing sign. And so we can you show the length?
The length of what?
Of
the full length?
park. Well, one that shows the existing Founders Park spot. I'll pass this down, but
I'm not sure what you're asking.
this one. One of the instigators to the conversation was the location of the sign as is now and the flower bed around it are actually very, very awkward. And the bed is regularly quite unkempt. So it's quite unkempt. So it's not a very attractive front face to our city in this busy intersection and corridor where many people travel every day. And so in the new design, we were talking about the scale and the location that makes more sense for the sign to the park. And so it wasn't that it had to be a fancy plaza as much as just this is the spot that's going to hold the sign, and we wanted it more hardscaped than softscaped so that it lessened the maintenance. So you've got a little bit upfront cost, but over the years, you're going to save a lot because it's lessening the maintenance for our parks department rather than increasing it. And then the other thing that happened at the exact same time was the bus stop improvement. And we also got a little bit of a grant money for an additional bench because that bus stop is quite often crowded. And so it just made sense to put in place a plan for a new sign in a better location and considering the bus stop that gets highly used. So that was the context of why we even drew these plans up. And what we were saying in our meeting is that the number that Dan showed us, which is very, very preliminary, to do the plaza, not including the sign, was more affordable than I would have guessed. And so it was an estimate of about $20,000, and that did include a $6,000 Trails kiosk, which we don't have to include in the plan, right? We could make instead a William R. Smith historical story plaque or something. And so...
but that didn't include the sign or the monument.
That didn't include the sign,
So
right.
it was just $20,000 for the
right.
plaza.
So if we minused the, it could range depending on what we wanted to put in it, depending on the money that got raised. But towards the end of the conversation with Steve and Dan and Robin and I all contributing to that conversation, the tone that I took away from it was we could try to, in a really formal, organized way, reach out to all these very many descendants. And there could be one or two that plant some seed money of a little bit of a larger amount that inspires kind of a matching in smaller amounts by many people that are descendants. So we thought, the tone that I took away from it was it might be worthwhile to make the effort to show a proposed plan of a very highly improved places. So not only would you get the Smith name on the sign, but a whole facelift for the front of the park and something that they could be proud of. This would be a partnership, of course. And so then the other remaining factor was I think that we would need to take this idea to the Parks Committee and ask them if they want to consider putting this on their priority list. And one of the things that I brought up in the meeting is the Parks Committee has numerous times talked about the fact that they have their priority list and it goes Community Park and then Island View. But those are millions of dollars, or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars at least. And so then sometimes, you go a few lines down in the priority list and it will say swing at Library Park, which is $3,000. And so they've often said, we should, now that we actually do have the RAP tax in place, we should revisit this and figure out which low-hanging fruit types things we could get done, and then people could see immediate improvements for the RAP tax money that they've been paying.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. If there had not been a name change to the park, would this have any priority at all?
Probably not right now.
So the purpose of this meeting was to get a design proposal for a sign to help with the fundraising, or get a proposal from Dan. Did we accomplish that?
So one of the ideas which I liked was this right here, this Freedom Hills Park sign. Mm-hmm. The same one is down at the Porter Walton Park.
And we have two Welcome to Centerville signs.
We have two Welcome to Centerville signs that look something like that. And doesn't the museums look a little bit like that too?
Which one? Museum?
No.
Museum is quite different.
But so I thought it was kind of cool if we kept the idea of that same theme in all of our parks, so that you kind of realize you're at this park or you're at that park. I like the idea of having the same thing. So rather than just getting a new wood thing, maybe compromising and trying to see what it would cost to do at this Freedom Hills Park, we may even be able to use the pillars that are already there and just, you know.
Yeah, since we built that, Steve, don't we have the drawings for that and the bill of materials for what that sign element costs?
We probably do somewhere.
He said that he thought it would be
It came with a, yeah, probably.
$4,000 to
some-
$6,000, but that's the whole thing. So if we actually used part of what we already have, it wouldn't be near that expensive.
Yeah, I'd hate to see the rock pillars leave, because they are, I mean, that's classic Centerville.
That's kind of what I thought.
Those rock pillars on that sign, I don't think are
It would
highest
be
quality
much smaller
construction.
than this sign if you
But,
use those rock pillars.
You know,
This is
I'll
your signature.
apologize first that I went to bed too much past my bedtime, so I'm not as nice as I sometimes am. But I just had to pass a really big tax increase. And I resent the push that, oh, now we can afford to make some really expensive improvement to the park. I feel scammed. I don't like it. I think if we really needed that tax increase, and that's the case that was made to me, then we darn well better be spending on things that actually matter, and this doesn't. And I don't think the family will feel slighted if we leave it in the place that it is. I think it's fine. I'm happy to have it, match with the other ones, but I don't think we should make a new plaza. I don't think anyone uses the one that's already there. We already have not much space on the 4th of July, and if we use up more on the plaza, then what are we going to cut out on the 4th of July? I think we're a little overkill.
The council has the prerogative to go out and, put a banner over the current thing or put a new piece of wood up. I would ask you to think long-term. The builders of this building could have built a cinder block building. Instead, they chose to put expensive Centerville rock on it, the Farmington flagstone, to build high quality, a quality dais, some architectural features. This is your signature park. When I go by that, I think, why do we have such a puny, pathetic-looking sign at our signature park? We have a beautiful statue. Why don't we have the sign over there by the statue? But this says something about Centerville, whether it's a sign that matches the others. Whatever we do, I'd like us to do a quality job at it, because it's going to last for another 30
I think you're talking about
40
really, though,
years.
you've got phases to this. We've got, there's an immediacy to change the sign. I mean, there's that. As to whether or not you successfully raise enough money to do anything else, that's totally different. And echoing what Stephanie is saying is I think we have to be still responsible with the funds we have, and where the answer to the question is if the name hadn't changed, we wouldn't be considering a $10,000 sign, then the argument as to this is our signature park doesn't really weigh out for me as heavily, because it's not high enough on the priority list to where we would have changed it. So, where I understand the argument, I'm thinking the immediacy is the name, and then if you want to look at it later,
right,
that's
which I also
else.
addressed in our meeting, and I said this. I want to clarify a few things. Number one is, I'm fine with if all anyone cares about is changing the name to Smith and keeping it where it is. But what I would recommend in that situation is very, very minimal investment. Because for me, the issue was more, I did not want to see a high dollar amount invested for a nice sign in what I consider the incorrect location. So, to your point, Stephanie, about the crowded park and the 4th of July, that was actually one of the intents of these design plans, is the sign and this awkward flower bed creeps too far into the park. So it actually moves it all closer over to the edge and the bus stop, which increases the open space for the park. And then to the third point that I'd like to make, to George's point of phases, I don't have any personal investment in this at all. And the only reason it is coming up is because we're talking about replacing the sign. So if we're going to invest it, let's talk about where in the future it might make the most sense and look at plans that have already been drawn up, because we have considered it, and the Parks Committee just never has revisited their list in detail since then. So they might decide it's important, and that's what the RAP tax was charged for, was these parks improvements, okay? But my point is that I don't have any personal investment in it. It's just this council decided to change the name. The family would like to see the sign changed. And so I would suggest we consider putting it in strategically the best spot. And if no other improvements other than the new spine go in, but it's in the placement of where future improvements might be made, that's what makes the most sense to me.
So I'm glad to still go to the family, see how much money we can raise, because that's going to give us an idea. I think that I may start with something like this, whether we have to use the old pillars or whether we can get enough money, maybe some in-kind donation of work that we could, and we could maybe, if we got the whole thing, we could get it moved, and definitely a nicer flower bed around it. I mean, the one that is there is very unkept, and it doesn't look good. So we maybe need to look into, either way, we need to look into redoing that. But I'm glad to still go to the family and see what they want. Maybe they're grandiose, and maybe they'll say, hey, we want this and we're willing to finance it, or we want this and we'll do half of it. So I'm more than willing to. I've already put some research in. I'm still trying to find a bigger scope of the descendants, and I'll get some letters and things going. And so, you know, as far as that goes, I'm glad to start this. Now I have an idea of, you know, something.
You feel like you've got enough to start the fundraising effort?
I do.
Okay.
But I think that you need kind of a watermark as to what is the cost for just the sign, just the inside, not the pillars. And then, because if you fall short, we can't say, oh, I was $500 or $1,000 short of the whole sign, therefore we can't do anything. We need to know when we've hit the minimum commitment to at least change the plaque on the inside.
I will get that information.
So is it worth it to have pay Dan a couple $100s to do some drawings? And
I don't think at this point, let's find out how much. I mean, let's not pay him to do drawings till we know what kind of money we're going to get in.
Well, let me suggest this. You probably ought to at least allow for a few hours of his time for Robin to consult with him about the use of the existing pillars and how a sign could be incorporated with those. If you want to use the existing
on the sign?
If you want to use the existing pillars and don't want to just replace it with the piece of wood, there needs to be some kind of analysis by a professional as to what could be done, what's the condition of those pillars, that kind of thing. So, you know, there's about $400 remaining on that initial $1,000 contract that we had with him regarding the Founders Park frontage, and I would suggest you allow that to be used at least, and maybe say that plus $200 or $300 more if necessary, just for this process of examining and determining what the cost might be and the feasibility of using those existing pillars.
Well, I'd kind of like to figure out financially what I think we can do, get some information that I can get that isn't going to cost us anything,
Okay.
and then go back to him.
Well, so you're just assuming that, what are you going to use as the assumed cost when you talk to the family?
Well, I'm going to give them some different options.
Like this?
You know, I have it all, and I can give them some options and say,
Okay.
we can do this, we can do that. You know, I may have somebody that would be willing to look at the pillars and stuff, give me some ideas of where we're at, and then meet with him again.
Yeah.
And say, okay, I think this is what we're going to be able to afford, this is kind of what we're thinking about, because right now I feel like I'm wasting my time with him until I have some more information.
Okay.
And I was just going to say a little bit the opposite, that with the experience that I have with fundraising, it's really most beneficial to have your plan and your goal number in place first, and then go out and say, this is what we're shooting for, and this is our goal. And then if you fall short, then you decide where to go from there. Do you have a party that can match, such as the RAP tax funds? Do you change your your plan and let the donors know that it didn't quite meet up to our needs, but we'll be able to do this with the money instead. So I would go about it a little bit the opposite way.
But if we can only get $500, I don't want to spend $400 of it on with him at this point until I can go and say, we've only got $500, what are we going to do with it? Or I'm thinking we can get $5,000, you know, how could we stretch it as far as we can go? I still want to meet with him, I still want his input on it. I just feel like it's early for me because I want to get more information before. Right now, I don't have anything to sit down and work with him on.
Okay, so we've had a good report. I like Steve's suggestion to Robin, go ahead and do the research you want, but if we still had a couple $100 left on that previous contract and Robin comes back and needs some advice.
Which I will.
Let him talk to her and give her some advice. And we appreciate Robin taking the lead on the fundraising effort.
Thank you.
And I just want to say one other thing and ask Stephanie, were you referring to the property tax increase?
I was referring to the property tax increase. I think even if the family funds it all, the timing is unfortunate to have a property tax increase and then, oh, look, we've got a great big new thing at the park.
Okay, because I will just say that I think that there's probably a pretty clear understanding in this community that they passed a RAP tax quite some time ago, and I think that people would be really glad to see the smaller size improvements in our parks as we wait for the bigger things to be able to happen. So I just wanted to be...
I totally agree with your idea on low-hanging fruit on the parks.
Right,
I think
which
that's a great idea.
some improvements here to make it look nicer and more inviting to our community that passes by this area regularly, I think would be something the Parks Committee would likely recommend.
Well, thank you very much for that report. I'd suggest we continue on with our agenda, or we can, it depends on, next up on our agenda is a discussion on sidewalks and park strip and trees. You could spend a lot of time on that, or you can spend...
Or we can postpone.
We can, if you want to have a good long discussion on it, we may want to take a break first.
Well, that seems like maybe another work session.
If you want to do involve the public and have a longer, more involved process.
Let me suggest this. You're going to meet Thursday night on subjects that are going to be substantial, and I suspect that they may require yet another work session, which you may need to use October 17 prior to your meeting for that work session. But if you don't, then you could have this discussion perhaps in the work session on the 17th.
Seems more like a work session.
I don't know, the night's young. By city council standards.
It is.
And I'm willing to come back after a break and discuss it some as well. But
Council, would you like to have a substantial discussion on this, or postpone it for future?
I'm good for substantial.
I'm good for postponing. I like Steve's idea of going the 17th, planning the 17th work session.
if you don't use it for,
more.
Yeah, I mean, this is one, you have some time, you can work it in at some point, but, so I don't know if the 17th might be needed to continue your other more timely discussion and decisions you got to make about cemetery and parks.
I think that's going to chew up the entire time of that work session. I don't see these two fitting in the same window at all.
Well, yeah, I didn't, now, the Thursday night work session is the cemetery
I
and
wouldn't be
parks.
surprised if that one continues.
Yeah.
Into another.
Yeah, and if it does, then I wouldn't suggest you try to put this on the same agenda with that, but.
Well, just
The other thought on park strip and trees is you may have, while the council makes these decisions, your election for mayoral candidate, they may have strong opinions on park strip and trees and the direction we go. And having, knowing that may help you decide the direction you're going to go.
Are you saying we should vote tonight?
We're doing pretty good if the hottest political issue is trees in the parks.
Yes, and cemetery space. So,
I also guess I want clarification. Is the goal, the first step goal, to just set up the process that will be more lengthy, right? I assume.
You had some requests from citizens to have a more involved process.
Well, here's my thought of the next logical step. Is we need to review your answers to the questions and pin down where are you really on the answers to those questions. Which do you agree on, which don't you agree on? In fact, I had copies tonight I can send with you if you'd like. I've highlighted some pieces of it that I was going to focus on tonight, but I could send those with you and we could talk about them in the future. I think those questions provide the foundation for making some decisions that then lead to some following steps. But at some point, yes, you'll want public reaction, but I'm not sure where this council is on those questions.
There's no proposal to have public discussion on, right?
No, not yet. No.
I think we can talk about it at a work meeting.
Yeah.
I'm good either way, to be honest.
We're taking on a lot of big things right now. I think we wait till we get a work meeting time.
From a status standpoint, are all the 3-inch problems resolved?
Yeah, all the over 3-inch. We have 1 to 3-inch. We have between 400 and 500 of those.
Yeah, no, those I know are not.
Right.
But the 3-inch plus are all resolved.
And then you're working on an area, as you know, in the city, everything between 1/2 inch and 1 inch. But everything under 1/2 inch, we're just keeping painted.
Right.
When I was talking to him at my transportation committee meeting, we were just discussing some of this stuff. And some of the cities have an idea where they have a list and you can call and ask to be put on the list and you agree to pay for half of what it is. So that gets you a higher priority of getting your sidewalk fixed if you're willing to pay for half. And they've got a waiting list.
Yeah, and that's an idea that we can certainly consider.
Who are waiting to pay half to get them done.
But the decision that's got to be made along with that is that many of these 1 to 3 inches involve trees.
Right.
And you've got to make some decisions about existing trees.
Right. And those are policy decisions. You've seen, we've heard from our public works staff how they feel about this, and city staff. We've heard from some council members that the data says something different.
So do we replace one of those, do we make those repairs without removing the trees that are there that have caused that? Or do we, or does it depend on how much the repairs cost versus how much the tree removal costs? You know, the answers to your questions were somewhat mixed. And so I think it would be useful to go through those questions and see where you fall on each of them. And some of you may have changed your mind, maybe you haven't, but I can at least see where the majority of you are on certain questions, but we need to pursue the line of questioning beyond what I ask you on those questionnaires.
How about we schedule this for a work session? And have
That sounds lovely.
Do you envision having?
I'm just going to hang on to these that I was going to hand out to you, unless you want to take it with you.
What is that?
You have them digitally. I have just highlighted some parts of it that I was going to focus on, but I think I'll just hang on to them and hand them out when we meet.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Okay, I think we don't have a significant amount of other things, so I'd like to just continue through.
So we're going to give staff direction as to when this work session is, or are we just going to bring it up at a later time?
I think we should not skip a work session until this is done.
I like that.
Now, if there are other things that take priority, and there are some, those come first.
So you're talking about on the nights of regular council meetings, if we don't have another more pressing topic for the work session, we'll take this one up. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right.
Is that all right, George?
That makes perfect sense to me. I'm good with it.
Martyr for work sessions. Great.
Nothing if not thorough.
Yes. Thank you. Mayor's report. I have 2 things I wanted to report on in anticipation for the work session on Thursday around cemetery and park space. Steve and I and Bruce Cox met with Scott Russin from Russin Brothers to talk about various options. We're trying to get some more data to give you some, hopefully some more information on the Thursday session. So I wanted to let you know that was happening.
Okay.
We may or may not have as much data as we would all like, but we're trying to make
Something's better than nothing.
trying to make an effort to help us find data to make decisions and options. Second, I got a letter from Steve.
Is that work meeting just us, or is it, is there anyone else?
It's just the
coming?
city council, 6 o'clock on Thursday?
6 o'clock Thursday, we've invited Lynn Keddington and Bruce Cox to come. There's 3 parts to the agenda. Lynn will speak to the first 1 or 2 of those, and I suspect the biggest amount of time will be on the third subject, though, is why I've put it third, and that's the cemetery options discussion.
Okay.
So just a teaser, Lynn was able to get answers to the questions we had?
I haven't talked with Lynn.
Okay.
I am asking him to come back, though, and hopefully he'll have that report.
No spoilers, I guess, okay.
Now, the mayor, the other subject you were going to address, did you see my email today that suggests that?
Yes, I did. I
okay.
replied to it. So we got a letter from the, was it Historic Society?
State History Division.
State Division of History regarding the nomination of the Ron Randall gas station and to be a historic, put on the National Historic Register. And after some discussion with, their proposal was we want to consider this at the October 26th meeting that we have. And as
What is that? Is that a?
I'll let Steve,
yeah,
there's some problems with this because we didn't follow the right process. And
Yeah, we get this letter from the State Division, History Division, saying you're invited to send somebody to the October 26th meeting of the board, the state board, that considers those nominations. But when I mentioned this to Corey, he remembered that, as I had, that the only involvement the council has had with this at this point was that you authorized a study to be done of the historic nature of that property. And what Corey intended the process to be was that it goes to the report goes to the Landmarks Commission, and then they were going to speak with Ron Randall about the report, and then come to and see what his reaction was to this possibility, and then come to the council. The Landmarks Commission forwards to the council their recommendation as to whether to submit this to the state, and then the council determines whether to go ahead and submit this to the state. I don't know how it got to the point where the state is already inviting us to
I'm so confused.
a board meeting.
Well, what's the nomination process? Can a private individual ask for a nomination to the Historic Register?
I think the Landmarks Commission was involved in
The Landmarks Commission did commission a study. That was one of the things they funded this year.
There was an application of
Yeah, I don't.
And Ron was there. I was there the night that Ron was there and said that he was happy to be on it. And
Ms. Corey's understanding, though, that there was the intent to review this study with him after it was done. The Landmarks Committee would review it, make a recommendation to the City Council, then the Council would submit the nomination on.
Did the Landmarks Commission submit a nomination?
I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm asking what the nomination process is. If just asking the state on the age of a building they said, oh, this fits the criteria, it's nominated by default. That's the part of this I'm not understanding is how formalized is this process?
I didn't bring the letter because
The study is pretty in-depth and formal and cost, I don't know.
And we
quite a
paid
while.
for that.
And we paid for that out of the Landmarks Commission. Coral
gave us
came
all of
and
that.
did
It's
a
all been done. The study's
presentation
been
for
done.
that.
So that makes sense that they're assuming that's part of a nomination process?
I
So
would
it sounds
assume
like-
so. Okay.
Well,
The point is that it never came, the council hasn't reviewed the report and weighed in on whether this should or shouldn't be nominated formally for this. And we have a number of things in our general plan that are.
you need to be aware of the whole context of this matter and its impact before you nominate onto the state. And if you choose to nominate, What are the implications of that? What are your options later if you nominate? Those are things that I think the council should understand before you forward the nomination.
So this is,
So
okay,
this is something that should be on our council agenda next time? is
Well,
that-
I think your Landmarks Commission doesn't meet until, the fourth week of the month? Is that right, Stephanie?
That's right. But I'm sure they'd be willing to come and report to the council in the meantime.
So I think staff recommendation, and my recommendation is that we inform the state that we would like to, we need to discuss this more, and we haven't determined how we want to proceed. If they would just table, not consider it at this meeting, and the council may recommend they consider it at a future meeting.
what's a future date for nomination? That seems like.
Why can't we talk about it at our meeting that's between now and then and have a decision, and then we can tell the state for sure?
Well, if
If our meeting's on the 17th.
You have that option. I'm just reacting. What Corey told me was that it was the understanding the Landmarks Commission would receive this report and discuss it after it was completed, and then forward and discuss it with Ron Randall as well, and then come to the council with it. Has that occurred?
All of that has occurred.
All of that has occurred except coming to the council.
Okay.
Because I was there at the meeting where the lady came and
Did the presentation.
did the whole presentation.
I was out of
And-
town, Robin went
Yeah.
in my place.
And
So-
Ron Randall was there with his daughter, and
So we can put it on the October 17 council meeting if you
That would
like.
be good.
In that case, we could leave
We
it
can talk to
possibly
the
as a
Landmarks
possibility on the October 26th. The October 26th State Board meeting could still remain.
Well, and I think part of that, I think George was on to the right question, is who can apply for this? Because if Ron or the Landmarks Commission applied for it,
maybe
We
they
may
don't
not
need
have
it.
any.
The city
may
council
not
may
have the
be
city
just a
council.
right,
ceremonial
it's not like
resolution.
you can yank the nomination out, or can you? I don't know. So I guess the question is who nominated it? Because if it is the Landmarks, then really they are an advising body, and the council can weigh in.
What-
But if someone else, like Ron Randall, we could
It may
weigh
have been the
in,
lady
but-
that we
I've
hired.
heard
I don't think the Landmarks Commission can make the recommendation directly to the state without the city council's endorsement of that. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Now, can Ron Randall do it? I suppose he can, but I just don't think he, I really doubt he has.
I just,
think he's been
between
busy typing stuff.
now and the next meeting, it'd be nice to know what spurred the letter from the state. Was that from the report, the evaluation, or was it from somebody actually nominating the?
So we'll get that information, we'll put it on the next agenda for discussion.
I think it is important that someone make sure that Ron Randall understands the impact of becoming a historic structure.
He does, and that's what they went over with him at that meeting.
And Steve's point is, the council also needs to understand the implications of this for our traffic pattern out in front, for future Fourth of July celebrations, for the long-term, the plan, the parks plan we have,
Financial.
everything else that we have in place.
Financial
And
impact.
weighs the financial cost of supporting another
Museum.
structure if that becomes
Well,
a
it's-
public entity, a public.
Yeah, if it becomes public.
Right.
I just want to look at it in terms of if the next nominating period is a year down the road, and this is here, I don't know that we should necessarily punt it past the nomination period. Given the age of the owner, I would prefer that we deal with that during the period, once we have the full date on the nomination.
Especially with the time and money that's already been spent on it.
We'll put it on the agenda for next meeting. Steve, City Manager's report.
Very briefly, tomorrow night is the candidates forum. It's really the mayor's forum, since that's the only race we have. So the two mayoral candidates will be in the lobby at 6:30, and then at 7, from 7 to 8, will be asked questions in here by the Utah League of, not the League of Women Voters. League of Women Voters, the Davis County chapter, or whatever it is, for an hour. That's tomorrow night.
At 7?
At 7, the question and answer period.
A thought I had on that is I wondered if we could use the YouTube channel and stream that.
No, because that's not an official function of the city, right? They rent or we.
Well, they don't rent it. They're doing public service with
Right.
sponsoring this, so we don't charge them. But,
Doesn't
I-
that seem like a good idea?
Well, no, I'm not opposed
They-
to it. It's
they
just
did
when
ask.
You couldn't stream it to the
They
channel.
said they are going to plan on streaming it, but they're bringing their own equipment. However they're going
Yeah,
to do it.
if they have their own YouTube.
They have their own.
are you sure that they
That's
said?
probably
Yeah, we had that
better.
discussion this morning.
Okay, all right.
The League of Women's has the.
League of Women's, yeah.
Streaming it live or just later?
I don't know what they're planning to do.
Okay, streaming it, I guess, means live.
If it turns out they don't have the right equipment, is there any opposition to using our equipment?
As long as we're not stepping on somebody's toes.
Well, I do have some concerns streaming it to the city's YouTube website.
Yeah,
That's
it
my
would go to
concern.
our
If they
city
want to
account.
use our own equipment and stream it to some other website, that's perfectly fine. It's like using this
As long as they
or our
just
TV.
log
They
into
can't
to a
be
different
on our
account.
As
As long as
channel.
we don't disturb our configuration so badly we can't get it back
True,
quickly.
that's
So
true, too.
that's why I'm looking at you, Jake, is
I think
in terms
we
of.
would.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's all
We would have to
configured.
have our personnel here to make sure that it's operating correctly and to get, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we would be using city resources.
Well, we're
But they're
using
providing our
resources.
citizens a
It's a great
service,
service.
an important
It is.
service
We're already
that's
using resources.
core to the
Well, you can always
Yeah.
videotape it and then upload
public
it to your own
process.
Right.
site. I mean, if it's really problematic for the structure of the way we do things, it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's too hard. But I
I think it's in our best interest to advertise this, and if they have it, and we can tweet it out and put it on our Facebook page, I think we should do
Yeah,
it.
they're already making plans to do some kind of recording of it.
Okay, but how do we find out about it?
You mean, tweet, you
Right.
would like us to tweet it out that it's
Put a link on
available?
our
That's
front page.
So they are
Sure,
recording
yeah,
it.
I don't have a problem promoting it, I just don't want to be in the business of creating
Yeah,
their
we-
media.
We can follow up with them. And
All right.
Then Thursday is the work session. That's it.
Great. I'm not aware of any miscellaneous business. Does anybody have any miscellaneous business to discuss? Let's move straight to a motion to adjourn if you didn't have board appointments. I do not have a board appointment. I have heard from a planning commission member that they intend to resign, but have not received any resignation on that. So we don't have anything on that, but if
resigning early or the end
resigning
of their term?
resigning early from their term. And if so, I'd be looking for a planning commission member between Parrish and Chase. Kind of, we've got a lot of folks on the south, got a lot of folks on the north, looking for somebody in the middle. So if you, I've got some suggestions already, but if you want to make some other suggestions to me, let me know. That's it, so I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Oh, there's cookies right there.